What's going on, everybody? This is Aaron back in beautiful Houston, Texas, and in today's video we're going to be talking about, is flipping land easier than flipping houses? So we are joined by Lee Blackshear, a wealth of knowledge here in the Houston area. How are you doing today, Lee?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic, and I truly appreciate you for having me on the podcast today. Like you said, we're in a great day and a beautiful, beautiful morning here downtown Houston. Look forward to talking more about wholesaling and actually flipping land.
Absolutely. No, and I love this location too. I mean, I'm looking out here at the Houston skyline. There's a lot here going on downtown. We've got the Toyota Center next door,
Yep.
a lot of apartments, a lot of places to walk. This is an awesome part of town.
Central, like we discussed a little earlier, man. This is no better place to be if you're looking for accessibility. Pretty much, in this area, we're just about 10 minutes out from pretty much all the inner loop. So, and then of course, if you want to get out to the suburbs, it takes maybe 20 minutes or so if there's no traffic.
Yes, sir. That's
Absolutely.
right. Now, and you're a native Houstonian, aren't you?
Native Houstonian, born and raised, so I've seen pretty much the ins and outs, but man, this city continues to grow at a steady pace, and it's always something new to discover out here, so I think that's the fun part about living in Houston as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know when we connected, you're a man who wears many hats. You work on the flipping side, you work on the wholesale side, and what interested me was your knowledge about land. So, if you wouldn't mind talking a bit about the wholesaling part, just a kind of a quick overview. What is wholesaling?
No, absolutely. So wholesaling, man, it's, of course it's huge out here right now, and it's, been around for quite some time. I got started, man, maybe about 8 years ago. So, I've been able to consume and, collect a lot of data and just understanding what the wholesaling business is. It's actually quite simple. So, in most, simplest form of just expressing is basically being able to talk to someone who's in a position of distress. So they have a situation that they may need help with, that wants to sell their property. They don't have to, but they absolutely must sell their property. And you're able to get this property under contract for a price, let's say, let's just give a ballpark figure of 100,000 because it's super easy for numbers wise. You're able to pick this property up for half of that amount. So let's just say you pick the property up for 50,000, and then you come in and you turn around and you look for someone who can actually purchase this property for a little bit more than you paid for it. So the name of the game in this business in terms of wholesaling is being able to find properties that are deeply discounted, and then you can turn around and sell them for a little bit more than you paid and make the middleman fee in between. So I don't like to overcomplicate this business because it's not complicated, but it's not easy. It's very simple, but it's not easy, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great explanation as well. It's funny. Wholesaling is one of those things where people can say, "Oh, you can make money with make money in real estate, no money down." It almost sounds too good to be true, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You've heard it quite a bit here on YouTube and all the different platforms where make money with no money down, and don't use your own cash. Well, there's small things about that of course, my person, I would definitely suggest to someone who's new and looking to get into the wholesaling business that it is going to require capital, and it is going to require time. Not a lot of capital to start, but certainly a lot of time. So with that being said, it definitely is a way that you can change your family. You can change, your generational, the generational structure of your family. You can change, if you ever wanted to become wealthy, this is a great way to start, in terms of real estate investing.
Yes, sir. No, that's a great way to put it. And I know at the beginning of the video we talked a bit about your knowledge of the flip side, the wholesale side, and what's unique about your perspective is you're also working with land. So could you explain how is wholesaling land different from maybe wholesaling a property with a home on it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aaron. So the good thing about it is that with land, the thing I like about land so much is that with land, you don't really focus on so much anything else but the land, the acquisition of the land. So typically sellers who are interested in selling their property, especially land, they don't have the attachment as if they had the attachment to a house. On the house, they have relics, they have old memories, they have things that they've experienced over the amount of years that they've lived in this home. They decorated it, they spent a lot of time in this home, they've lived in it. Sometimes they may not have lived in it, but they have people who lived in it. So they got a lot of stories from these homes, but with land, it's completely different. They don't have stories with land. It's more or less like, okay, my father, or maybe, I bought this land maybe 10 years ago, or my father had this land 30 years ago, the grass has grown for about, 5 years, so it's super, super high. And at this point, you're like, okay, well, they don't have the emotional attachment and connection to the piece of land, which makes it easier for you to actually have a chance to get a good price and get that deeply discounted deal that you're looking for in terms of wholesaling. So that's what I like to, focus on land a lot, because the emotional connection that a seller typically has to a home, they don't have it with land. And I think that's really, really cool.
I didn't think about that. That's so interesting as well. I mean, maybe a family has lived in a home for generations. Maybe they moved to a new city. That's been their home for a while. Whereas with land, it's just dirt, right?
It's just dirt.
Completely different.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got it, my man.
For sure. And just out of curiosity, what's the benefit of buying land from a wholesaler?
Oh man, that's a great question. So, of course, usually most builders, most developers, when they are in the process of buying land, typically they go to their local realtor. And it's because it's, that's the first thing most people go to in real estate. They have access to the MLS, they have access to, a ton of properties. So, but when you are going to, to the MLS, you're paying top dollar, or close to it. And in this case, when you're working with a wholesaler, our whole primary objective is to find deeply discounted properties. So that way we could produce, deeply discounted deals for land buyers. So in this case, if a developer chooses to come and do business with a wholesaler, well, instead of finding a property where he's paying 85% to 90%, or sometimes even more, he may come to a wholesaler like myself or someone else who is doing this business, and they may be able to find a property where they're paying 65%, 70 cents on the dollar. And I think that right there is super important because, of course, your all-in cost when you're a land developer, as you know, you have, man, you may have to replat the land itself. You may have to do a mirage of things before you even start building on the land itself. So in that case, you want to find the deal as deeply discounted as you can. And that's why you want to work with as many as wholesalers as you can if you're in this business as a developer.
And that's a great perspective as well. And kind of talking about the numbers, talking about the dollar signs as well, it all comes down to the comps, right? I guess,
Absolutely.
Maybe if you're flipping a home, are there recently sold comps? How, I guess, land poses its own share of challenges. How are you able to run comps on land?
That's a great question. So with land, it's not too far off from running comps to homes. The only thing is, though, is there is not as many as vacant lands or lands that have been sold as there are homes. So you do have a smaller, I guess you could say just a smaller pool of land that have been recently sold in comparison to homes. But there still are, a number of land, pieces of land that are in multiple areas, especially in Houston, that you would be able to consider when you're actually running your comps. So when I am running comps on land, I typically look at the most recent solds over the last 3 to 6 months. And if I can't find anything in that regard, then I kind of just base it on what is sold maybe over a year. So sometimes you have to go back in 12 months and sometimes 18 months, but the market is ever changing. So you also just have to consider what it is that, just the square foot, the price per square foot of what land would probably sell for in specific subdivisions and areas. And you can kind of, determine that just based on, I would suggest probably talking to realtors and also just gathering data from just, pretty much a myriad of different factors from realtors to even your lenders, because they know as well. These guys have been in real estate for quite some time. So, you just want to collect as much data as you possibly can. If you don't have the comps just sticking out at you, sometimes they don't stick out at you. So sometimes you have to actually go a little bit further and dive a little bit deeper so you can find, some accurate comps.
Yeah, and that's a great take right there. Is you said something interesting, is that your pool is much smaller, right? So obviously you got to do your homework, your due diligence, but that pool of, I guess those pieces of land that you're looking at, it's much smaller compared to homes.
I agree with you. Yeah, 100%.
Completely. And, how is buying wholesale land deals in 2023 different compared to years past? We have lumber costs, inflation, maybe developers are buying, maybe they're not. How is wholesaling land now in 2023 different from maybe a year or 2 years ago?
Man, you got some great questions, Aaron, and you just keep them coming. So, yeah, in this case, I would say that a lot has changed, of course, because the price of everything has gone up. I mean, like you just mentioned, inflation is at a very, very high pace right now, and it's continuously moving up. So, with that being said, just looking at it from years past to where we've gotten to now, just with everything that has gone up, then that means that as a wholesaler, you have to look at deals from a price point. So now you're looking at getting deals at a much lower rate than you typically would. Okay, then you may have been able to offer anywhere from between 70 to 75% of ARV. Now you may have to come down a little bit lower and maybe come in at around 55 to 60% of ARV in this particular case, because you have to include those costs, those soft costs that all builders, all developers, and everyone who is looking to actively construct in this area or in any area, you have to consider what their cost is, and that ultimately is based on the inflation rate. I mean, everything is more expensive at this particular time. So, and money isn't cheap. Money is very expensive right now. So, with that being said, I think that because those things have played a role, then as wholesalers, we have to bring better deals. And ultimately, I think that is having our numbers correct and running the proper comps so we can get the absolute best deal to be able to, shoot to our buyers, which mostly if we're focusing on land, it's going to be your developers, it's going to be your land guys that are only looking for that, and we have a specific criteria set up for them.
Absolutely. And I think maybe that's a frustration, at least that I've heard amongst investors. They want to buy wholesale deals. Obviously, having that sort of service is great. The deal's brought to you and you can say yes or no.
Yep.
I know at times it can be a bit frustrating. It's like they're telling me it's 40K rehab, but is it really 40K? They're telling me I can sell for 230, but can I really sell for 230? So I guess land has its own share of challenges, and at the end of the day, you got to do your homework.
You absolutely have to do your homework, and sometimes you got to double down and do a little bit more and put the overtime in, because these days, man, you'll come across opportunities where you think, you got the numbers right on the money, but then you figure out that, man, I took it out there to the marketplace, and it was completely different than what I expected, because the feedback that I got lets me know that the market has shifted. Buyers, land buyers for sure, developers, they're buying much deeper than they typically were a couple years ago, even just 2 years ago, literally right around COVID. So, yeah, things have changed.
Yeah, completely. And I guess, speaking of prices, I guess I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think anybody does.
Okay.
But if land prices drop, should developers and builders still be buying wholesale deals? Is there ever a good or particularly bad time to check out wholesale deals?
You know what? That is a phenomenal question. I would say that the good thing about wholesale deals, they're always going to be deals, ultimately, keyword deals. And the reason why I say that is because if you're looking to buy a deal, you want it at a significant price reduced than what the actual market is. So that's why wholesale guys and wholesale, people in the wholesale business will probably always be in a good position, because if the market does continue to go up, then we just continue to just go down with our pricing and what our offers are. Now, who's to say that it's always going to work to where things will always get the absolute bottom dollar on price? May not be the case, but we know for sure that our bread and butter and our business model is to source actual deals, and that way we can pitch deals that are still below what typically buyers are looking to pay for on the MLS. We're still going to be able to beat the MLS, no question.
Yeah, completely. And I know that, maybe when you're flipping houses, I guess, your buyer would be called the end buyer, right? So you know that they're going to have the cash to do the deal. And one question people could have as well is, when your end buyer is a builder, developer, they're looking at it from a different lens than a flipper would. How are you able to get on the same page as a builder and developer and ultimately give them what they want? How are you able to present them a deal the correct way?
Oh, no. That's so the good thing is that when you're, discussing with a developer and a flipper, typically these guys are, have a very specific criteria. So once you understand their criteria, I think it makes it easier for you to be able to have a conversation with them and just kind of let them know, what it is that, hey, this is what I'm coming across. These are the opportunities that I'm finding, especially in specific areas. You know what your buyer, your developer likes. You know what your buyer likes. I mean, it's not cookie cutter as it would be for a flipper. It's very specific. So in that case, you just have really solid conversations with, the people that you are doing business. And it just all comes with experience and time. You do have the opportunity to build these relationships. And I think that once you commit to certain developers who have performed for you in the past, and it's easier for you to navigate around what they desire for their specific criteria. So I think just over time, building a relationship up with these guys typically it just allows you to source better deals. And then, after a while, you're doing multiple deals with them because they understand that you're the go-to guy for having the wonderful deals.
Absolutely, no, that's a great take there as well. And I know earlier in the show you'd mentioned the word replat, right? So maybe I guess maybe someone's not familiar with what replatting is. Is that taken care of before or after the sale, or where exactly should someone be thinking about a replat?
Well, as a developer and as a land buyer, someone who actually is looking to come in and build on their property, I think that it's very important to consider that in your cost after you purchase. So you're going to purchase the property, of course, but you have to consider that, if it's a huge piece of land and you want to split it up, then you're going to end up spending a little bit of money to get that thing replatted. So once you consider that, you have to just look at it from a perspective of, okay, this is going to go into my cost. This is what it's going to take for me to be all in. So I usually, even if I'm pitching it to a developer, the deal that I have, I embed the soft cost for replatting so that they do understand that whatever the price that I'm giving you is minus not only what the replatting fees is, but also the closing costs and just other things of that nature. So they do have like an all-in cost. So they know well before we end up signing on the dotted line what they're getting themselves into.
For sure. And when you say those soft costs, are those are those replat fees paid to a third party? Are they paid to the city, or like what exactly is that?
That's wonderful. I actually pay directly to the city.
Yeah, okay.
The city has to collect their fees if anything. Before anybody else gets anything, the city definitely has to collect, of course.
Absolutely. No, and that's a great take as well. And I'm curious as well. I know that, when you're wholesaling homes, people can be concerned about the backstory, right? Where is this home coming from?
Yes.
Are there any sort of maybe title issues, other financial issues with the property? With land, can you wholesale land with a mortgage or a lien on the property?
You absolutely can.
Okay.
That's the wonderful thing about wholesaling is that there's so many ways to get a deal done. The good thing is that if you are willing to make an offer on a property where it actually covers the mortgage that's existing on the property, or if there is a lien as well, it could be a duo thing. It could be a thing where there is a mortgage and a lien on the property, or there's just one or the other. But if you're able to offer enough to where it covers the mortgage and the actual lien, then I think that that's a good thing because it now allows you to take care of not only the seller's needs, but then you also have a pretty good deal still to be able to offer to your end buyer. So, yeah, you absolutely can. That's the wonderful thing about wholesaling is there's so many ways to solve a problem in this business.
Absolutely. And another question people could have would be surveys. So, if you're a builder, a developer, or just someone looking to buy land, how necessary is it to have a survey before closing?
Yeah, you absolutely want to have a survey because that's going to pretty much give you your outlining of the land itself. You're going to know all of the dimensions, and I think that's super important for a builder because these guys are very specific, like we mentioned earlier, with what they desire, and they also know just so many things that they can and cannot do. So I think with having a survey, it's super important. And then most title companies, they're probably going to at least ask if there's a survey anyway involved. And most developers are also going to want to know if there's a survey. If there already isn't one existing, they probably will order one before closing so they can have that right away.
Absolutely. And, the survey kind of tells a story, right? It shows the boundaries of the property, where it starts, where it ends, and also any potential issues, right? You don't know, obviously you only see the land, you only see dirt and grass, but there could be something else on the property where there's a line there, or you don't know what's there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can only imagine. Some houses didn't come with surveys, and then man, you got to end up, letting your buyer know, hey, you got to go and spend a little bit of money so you can get this survey because, you could only imagine that there is pieces of land out here that are completely different than what you may have been told by the seller, and then you go out there and get it surveyed, and then you notice that there's many different dimensions and things that just pop up along the process of getting it surveyed. So
absolutely. And I guess kind of off that, when you were talking about there could be something behind the curtain, maybe there's always a little bit more to the story when buying land. Houston has no zoning. Yeah. And Houston is a very different animal in the real estate market compared to maybe other cities in America. Could you explain, what no zoning means and what it means for someone that's looking to purchase land here in Houston?
Yeah, so it's really incredible out here that we don't have zoning. A lot of people, from around the country, I have so many different business partners and different friends and people and colleagues that have just, they still get a kick out of the fact that we don't have zoning here in Houston. But for me, since I'm born and raised here, I always just seen it as just normal. But zoning,
Right.
for instance, in Houston, you could be in, let's just say, for instance, for lack of better words, in the hood. In the hood, you can have a $2 million property that's literally right next to a $150,000 house. So without the zoning, that's permissible. And with zoning, then that would not be allowed. There's no way in the world that would be allowed because you just have certain zones that would only allow for specific deed restrictions. And in this case, you have some areas where there is no deed restrictions. So you literally can have a mobile home right next to a mini mansion. And that zoning right there is where there is, I guess structurally, it is kind of a bit of a conundrum, but I would say that it's interesting. I think it makes the city a little bit cooler, if you will.
Yeah, it definitely, just the layout of Houston is very unique compared to other cities that I've been in. And I guess maybe someone's gripe or complaint could be on paper or in theory, you could have a church next to a restaurant, next to a daycare, and it can kind of make things a bit unorganized. But in a sense, it also poses an interesting dynamic for the real estate market.
And you said something, you posed unique. I think that is extremely unique because where can you just, everybody can, just be so tight knit together in the community. You have a little bit of everything. You have, the top of the top, and then you have, something, a little bit less, and then you have everything in between. And I think that makes the diversity that we have here in Houston super popular. And, of course, it continues to just grow. No zoning. So that's what we got. And it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that is interesting. Kind of, you mentioned the deed restrictions as well. So at least on paper, no zoning could, I guess, have its own share of issues or problems. But in a sense, the deed restriction kind of establishes more order for the city, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where there is, the red line where it's like, okay, boom, we have deed restrictions. So of course, with the deed restrictions, some neighborhoods will not allow for, you can't build mobile homes right next to a home that's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot home. But, in some cases, you see it every day out here. And that's why, when we focus on land, we got to make sure that we are looking into the deed restrictions, because that's one thing that, developers, they focus primarily on, is finding if they can build, what can they build on this specific land in a specific neighborhood. Can they build a townhome, a 3-story townhome? Can they build a duplex? Can they build a tri? So that's very important for them to actually go in and take a look at. Is making sure that the deed restrictions are compliant and making sure that they can do what they need to do to, maximize their investment, if you will.
Completely. And I guess when you're talking about, I guess, compliance or, being compliant to the municipalities, how big of a factor is maybe an HOA to, a wholesale deal?
It's huge. It is absolutely huge, because an HOA can make or break a deal. If the fees are too high, sometimes, buyers are looking at it like, man, I don't know if I want to pay those fees, and if I do, I have to get the deal a little bit less than what I was assuming. Once they find out that the HOA fees are a little bit more expensive than what, maybe they didn't even know, then of course they're looking to see how can they get around that in terms of, maybe working with the price a little bit. So, that's one thing that we do as wholesalers. This is our, where we do our due diligence, making sure that we do understand what the HOA fees are. We do understand the small things like the deed restrictions, and we do have our, just like everything checked off, all the boxes checked off, that way that we can present, a wonderful deal and a great opportunity to someone who's coming in as an end buyer.
Completely. And I guess to really revert back to the title of this video, could you explain what's the market like for wholesaling land versus wholesaling, let's say, or flipping houses, right? How are those two things a bit different?
Yeah, no, big time. So with wholesaling land, it's all about speed. It's speed, it's fast, it's convenient. The biggest thing is that you don't have to focus on doing the swinging of the hammers. You don't have to worry about anything in terms of, actual labor. it's more or less a mental labor. So, you know, you have to do your homework. You have to understand, you know, like we said, mentioned the deed restrictions and understanding, you know, if there is any cost as far as soft cost is built in. Maybe you have to replat. Maybe you have to do, you know, small things that would, you know, make or break a land deal. Now with flipping, it's completely different. You have to go in there and look at it from a perspective of who's going to want to live in this property once it's, you know, been fully rehabbed, once it's been fully remodeled. And I think that's the ultimate thing with end buyer versus who's looking to buy land and an end buyer who's looking to buy a property. With the property, the biggest focus is making sure that that house is suitable for the person who's looking to spend their money and get a mortgage or pay cash for this property. I think with that, you know, you ultimately want to focus on presenting a wonderful product no matter what, but you work a little bit less, a lot of speed and convenience when you're doing land, and a timeline for a property that's, you know, a home, you're going to spend a lot more time into it. And I think that's one of the biggest things is time for sure.
No, completely. And it's funny, the way you explain it, it kind of cuts both ways. So do you think that flipping land is easier than maybe flipping homes, or?
Oh, no question.
Yeah, really?
No
Okay.
question. I think flipping land is always going to be easier day over day, just based on the scope of work that's required. So, you know, just doing the homework, like we just mentioned again, I think once you checked off all those dots and once you hit everything on that, you can pretty much find a buyer that's going to come in and get that land right away. Now with the home, it's going to require you to, of course, do far more work, far more time consumed, but it also can be very rewarding as well. So you don't ever want to just, you know, look at one from a better perspective, but you want to see what one is suitable for you if you're looking to invest in either one.
Completely. And you mentioned earlier, I guess, you know, how you pay for it, right? Paying cash. So a lot of these builders, developers, are they paying cash? Do they have a local bank? Do they have a hard money lender to help them purchase the land? Or how are most of these people financing their deals?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think you hit it right on the nail. They have a myriad of ways that they're financing these deals. Some of these guys are using local banks. Some of these guys have their own cash because they've been in the game for quite some time. They may have generational money. Sometimes these guys are using their own credit that they've built up over the course of, you know, 10, 15 years to where they're not only using their own credit, but they're using some of their own cash as well. So they're using multiple ways to finance these opportunities that they come across. And they're not trying to tie themselves up too thin and, you know, just use up all their capital because it is, you know, capital intensive, you know, especially when you're building, as you know. You can be in a project for over a year or so, you know, sometimes a couple years, just depending on how big the project is. So I think these guys, they pull money from every resource that they can when they're looking to, you know, finance a deal, if you will.
Yeah, completely. And I know the financing is key. And I guess on another end, curious as well about insurance, right? So maybe if I'm purchasing a home, I eventually want to flip, I need a certain type of insurance. Whereas with land, it's just dirt. There's nothing there. You know, how do you go about getting insurance, or what sort of insurance do you need for these sorts of deals for land?
Well, for land deals, if you're flipping a land deal, if you're wholesaling a land deal, you don't need any title insurance only. You just need, that's it. And that's only during the title process. So honestly, and you're not responsible for that, because if you are just a wholesaler and you're only looking to wholesale this property, your main focus is just acquiring a deal at a great price. The end buyer is going to be responsible for paying for the title insurance, so you don't have to focus on that. So that's a good thing, is that that's one thing that you can avoid, is paying insurance if you're wholesaling the property, wholesaling the land specifically.
Absolutely. And, you know, I know it's a bit different when you're, you know, you're looking to buy a home to flip. A lot of people talk about buying something sight unseen. So maybe I live in, you know, Wisconsin, I'm looking in Texas, I buy a property sight unseen, I've never physically walked the property. Do people do that for land as well, buying something sight unseen, or is it?
All day.
Really? Okay.
All day, literally. I mean, that's a good thing, is that we've had buyers that have come in, and these guys have actually, you know, been from out of state. Let's say we had a buyer, man, this guy was a really cool guy. I met him actually in California, but he actually took a look at our property out here in Houston, and it was only a 5,800 square foot property right here in the great city, the great area of 3rd Ward. It's a very, very popular historical neighborhood here in Houston. And he was so intrigued by it that he literally said that he would be able to close on it in 14 days. So once we got clear title, he literally committed to it, and all we did was send him pictures. We sent him a video of what the land looked like on the outside. And I think with just that information and those data, which he already knew a little bit about Third Ward, I don't know if he lived here before, but he just heard about it, and he was like, man, I would love to acquire property there. And sure enough, he bought it sight unseen. He never stepped foot in Houston. Yeah.
Wow.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. I mean, I guess, the proof's in the pudding, right? If someone is really that adamant and they're really wanting to get a deal done, I mean, closing within 14 days, you know, it shows someone's motivated, right?
No, 1,000%. I think the better the deal, of course, the more the motivation.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Ain't that the truth? And, Lee, just curious about you. We're here in downtown Houston. I'm obviously looking at the skyline. This is incredible. The accessibility that's here, the amount of growth, the amount of people coming in. You got me fired up about this part of town.
Absolutely.
What about you, Lee? What are you looking forward to for the remainder of 2023 and in the future?
Man, that is a wonderful question. And I love those questions because it definitely keeps me right ahead of what I'm doing in this current moment. So with that being said, we have a looming recession. Everybody's been talking about it. But honestly, the good thing about where we're at as a wholesale company is that we focus on no matter what, whether we're going to be in a recession, whether we're going to be in depression, or whether it's going to be the top of the market. Always focusing on acquiring deals at the absolute best price that we can. So focusing on purchase price, using our ARV formula, but also just adjusting and continuously just doing what's always been working. Sometimes we don't want to get too far out from what's always worked for us because we've seen many different economies, and based on the one we're at now, I still think it's really, really good. May change in a year from now, but for the time being, our focus is to continue to just put out good deals, put out quality opportunities, not only land but also for properties themselves. And for me specifically, because I live downtown, I just want to continue to live, and have fun and just continue to just enjoy the accessibility to get to these places, because sometimes I'm going all over the place just to get from one area to the next. But being downtown, I can get there within 15 to 20 minutes. So for me specifically, I'm going to continue to focus on just acquiring properties for myself, and not only that, because I do come across a lot of opportunities. So my primary focus is, of course, wholesaling, making sure that we can do multiple deals a month. But then not only that, also continuously, sourcing deals that I feel like I, would want to keep for myself. So I guess what they like to call it is cherry picking, and I'm going to continue to cherry pick some good deals because, if we're finding them and if they make sense, then I would like to take them down as well.
Absolutely, no, and that's a great take there. I know you talked a bit about what's next for you. Is there anything you haven't said you'd really just like to hit home for people, whether we're in Houston, another part of Texas, another part of the country? Is there anything else you'd like to really hit home for us?
Well, I would say that, no matter what's transpiring in this economy, no matter what the outlets are saying, no matter what's going on, remain focused on your goals, remain focused on the things that you feel that resonate with you, and continue to learn and educate yourself on, everything that's going on around you, because ultimately the education, which of course, while we're having this conversation now, ultimately will allow us to continue to thrive and succeed no matter what's transpiring, and continue to better yourself, continue to just become a better version of yourself every single day. Whether it's 1% better, I think that ultimately will allow someone who is brand new in this business or who is seasoned in this business to continue to thrive at an optimal level. And I would just suggest that to anybody who's watching, 1,000%.
Completely. That's what it's all about. And, as mentioned at the beginning of the show, you're a wealth of knowledge. It was great to speak with you a bit more about the particularities of Houston, your experience in the business, and of course that perspective of, wholesaling land versus, buying homes to flip. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show today.
Aaron, I greatly appreciate your time, my friend, and thank you for coming downtown so we can have this wonderful meeting.
All right. Y'all, that's it for this episode. We are signing off from downtown Houston with Lee Blackshear. If you are wanting to get in touch with Lee, want to ask him a bit about wholesaling, land, any particularities about Houston, are you building in Houston, builder, developer, whatever it may be, we will have Lee's information in the show notes, and we will talk to y'all next time.